Just pushing it to YouTube now, so you're fine. Okay, you're all set, Emily.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, September 21st, 2020. Welcome to the Burlingame City Council meeting. We're delighted you joined us tonight. I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's 7 o'clock. And before we get started with our agenda, we'll give our city clerk the opportunity to share how members of the public can join us and participate in the meeting while we are operating under Zoom.
Hi, everyone. So there's a couple ways for you to participate. If there's an item you'd like to talk on, please either send an email to publiccomment@burlingame.org. You can also Zoom chat me, or you can raise your hand. I do ask that you keep your microphone off when you are not being called on to speak. Not like my cat who's meowing right now. And I ask that you keep your video off as well, so that we can keep this meeting moving. Thank you.
Didn't know if it was a new baby or the kitty, but good to know Seymour's doing all right. So as we begin our meetings, we always begin with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. So if you're able and you can stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, thank you for doing so. All right, and we'll begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we are moving on to item number 3. We'll do our official roll call.
Councilmember Brownrigg or Coulson?
Here.
Councilmember Brownrigg?
Present.
Councilmember Ortiz? You're on mute.
See, that bar doesn't work sometimes. Here.
Vice Mayor O'Brien?
Here.
Mayor Beach?
Here. Everyone is present. Item number 4, we did not have a closed session, so there is nothing to report out. Item number 5, we have a few upcoming events. Let me begin with the most important, is that tomorrow, the September 22nd, is National Voter Registration Day. We know we have an election coming up in November. Lots of important items on that ballot. So please make sure you register to vote at registertovote.ca.gov. And make sure also remember, if you've got anybody who is turning 16 in your family, you can actually pre-register to vote at age 16. And then the county will automatically start sending your teens ballots once they turn 18. And we have a birthday in my family this coming weekend with a individual turning 16. So we'll be sure to do this on National Voter Registration Day. Remember that ballots start being sent out throughout the county on October 5th. So in just 2 weeks, they'll start to land in your mailbox. And if you have any questions about where to drop your ballot off, you can always mail it back, postage paid. But if you have any other questions, you can reach out to the Burlingame City Clerk. And you can also check our website as well and e-news for more information. This Saturday, September 26th, is the last official coastal cleanup day of the month. Saturdays in September, we're picking up litter around our neighborhoods. You can sign up and help us by being a part of Burlingame Blue Whale Team. That means our city gets credit for all the litter we pick up in our neighborhood. It's very easy to do. You watch a video, you RSVP, be safe, use social distancing, and then record the litter that you've picked up using an app. And be sure to register as Burlingame Blue Whales. There's more information on our e-news on the website as well. We are also this Saturday, once you're done cleaning up litter in the neighborhood, you can participate in the annual shred event. So if you have items that need shredding in your household, we're delighted to be offering that opportunity on Saturday morning, September 26th, between 9 and 12 noon. It's free. You can come to the Caltrain parking lot O, right along the Caltrain corridor near downtown at 290 California Drive. This is a shred event only. This does not include e-scrap waste, electronic waste, but you can bring all your items for shredding. We also have a couple of music events coming up, live music. Would you believe during COVID-19, our magnificent Parks and Recreation Department has figured out how to bring music to you. There's a virtual concert for older adults this coming Thursday, September 24th, between 2 and 3 p.m., where the Parks and Recreation Department is partnering with Virtual Companions to bring a mix of classical, jazz, pop, and other favorite music shown over Zoom. So it's safe from the comfort of your home. If you need any technical assistance, you can call our Parks and Recreation Department or Virtual Companions, and they will help you get squared away to enjoy the live music. For others who would like to get out of their house, Burlingame's first drive-in concert at the Golf Center. We've done drive-in movies, but now we're doing a drive-in concert at the Golf Center, is happening on October 2nd between 7 and 9 p.m. featuring music from Pop Fiction. The cost is $25 per car, and you can register at the Parks and Recreation site or call via phone, or you can register online. And with that, I think those are the announcements I have noticed. So I want to ask if colleagues have anything else they'd like to add coming up. We don't see any hands raised. Madam City Manager or other staff, if there's anything I've forgotten, feel free to pipe in. And with that, we've got a lot of great stuff coming up. So thank you for participating as you're able. With that, we do not have any presentations tonight on item number 6, but this is the time right now. We'll move on to item 7, public comments that are not on the agenda. So this is an opportunity for members of the public who are joining us tonight. If there's an item you'd like to talk to the City Council about that is not being considered on the agenda item, this is your chance to do so. We'll give you 3 minutes to speak with us about anything on your mind. Because of the governing laws that govern our open meeting law, the Ralph M. Brown Act prohibits us from commenting, deliberating on any matter, but we will listen and we can follow up with you as well. So, Madam City Clerk, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak?
We do. We received an email from Benito. He states, now that Facebook campus is nearing substantial completion, it would be helpful to hear what the city's plans are for the intersection of Beach Road and Airport Boulevard. Beach and Airport Road is a popular crossing for Burlingame families to walk or ride or scoot over to Coyote Point. That intersection is currently an uncontrolled crossing with no stop signs. It is the only crossing along Airport Boulevard and Bayshore that is uncontrolled. The developer has constructed the new realigned road within the campus. There are 2 signalized crossings, which are good. There are also 2 or 3 other crosswalks that have flashing beacon crosswalks. However, Beach and Airport Road, which is the busiest crossing of them all, even today, without the anticipated traffic, does not have a signal or a flashing beacon. That will put those families at increased risk of crossing. I ask you to please take a look and see if it too deserves a flashing beacon crossing or a stop sign. It's been a dangerous crossing for years and about to be worse once the campus fully opens. He included pictures, and you guys are all CC'd on the email, so you can review those as well.
Thank you, Benito, and thank you, Madam City Clerk, for reading that to us. Do we have any other members of the public who wish to speak on non-agenda items at this time?
I don't have any other emails, and it doesn't look like anyone has their hand up.
Okay, just a reminder for those of you who want to raise your hand, you can go to the participant window, raise your hand. If you're calling in by phone, you can dial *9 and that will raise your hand. And I don't see any other members of the public who wish to speak at this time. So thank you. We're moving on now to item number 8, and that is the approval of the consent calendar, which are usually approved in a single motion unless somebody pulls them for separate discussion. So at this time, I'd like to ask if any colleagues wish to pull an item from our consent calendar. And I do see a hand up from Councilmember Coulson. Which item? Yes.
8C.
8C.
Polling of existing development entitlements.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Coulson. I see Vice Mayor O'Brien has her hand up as well. Which item would you like to pull?
8D.
8D. All right, thank you. Any other colleagues wish to pull item A or B? Seeing none, I'd like to ask if there's any member of the public that wishes to pull one of these items. I don't see any hands raised at this time. Madam City Clerk, do we have any members of the public who wish to pull a consent item?
We do not.
Okay, then would anybody like to propose a motion to approve item 8A and B?
Move to
Move to
approve items
approve.
8A and B.
Thanks. I think that was a motion from, was that the vice mayor?
Yes.
And then seconded by Councilmember Ortiz. We'll take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes. Items 8A and B are approved unanimously, and we'll move on to item 8C, and that, I believe, was Councilmember Coulson's item. Go ahead.
Right, thank you. This is an adoption of a resolution providing a tolling of existing development entitlements. And I really want to thank staff for bringing this up. During COVID-19, I think it's been very hard for people to get everything organized around building. And as you can imagine, it's all slower. So my real question here is just, we're tolling it for 1 year from tonight to 1 year, September 21st, 2021. And I just wanted to ask Director Gardner, does it make sense just to toll it all the way through the end of next year to December 31st, 2021? And the reason I ask is because usually these things have to come onto our agenda 30 to 60 days in advance. And if you move it back, you're right in that first August meeting when we come back. And if there was, it doesn't leave a lot of time or cushion in there for any changes or anything like that. And as well, it's an odd date just to, to say like, well, this is good. It's going to toll till the 21st of September versus just saying the end of next year. I just worry that staff might always be looking it up. Is there any reason for it to be easier for you? If not, I'm fine with it is. I'm just quite curious.
So the tolling is actually, it would be based on the date of the specific application. So basically all the applications, you just add a year. So it's a little different. The last time we did this, we did an extension, which was to a date certain, which kind of just put everybody in the same boat. But this basically just stops the clock on every entitlement for a year, and then starts it up again in a year from now. Now, should we be in a situation a year from now, we need to keep the toll, essentially the clock frozen, we can do that. But so it does work a little differently than what we had before, but basically everybody gets a year, no matter when their application is expiring.
That's very helpful to understand the difference between an extension and the tolling. So thank you for that. And I'm perfectly happy for this. So I'm happy to make a motion to approve item 8C.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Councilmember Coulson and a second from Councilmember Brownrigg. But first, I want to make sure we open it up to public comment and see if any other colleagues have. Actually, colleagues, any other questions first? All right, seeing none. Any members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
No, we don't have any.
Okay, then with that, let's go ahead and do our roll call vote.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And now we'll move on to item 8D. And I believe that was Vice Mayor O'Brien would like to speak on that.
Yes, so I just actually am in support of the letter. I just have a question. So on the, let me see which paragraph, 1, 2, 3, third paragraph, last sentence. It says, we believe this would be in keeping with the standards of places of worship which are currently permitted to host gatherings for 25% of their maximum capacity or 100 people. Currently, we're not allowed to host. We're in the purple tier, so it's not allowed. It's only when we get into the red tier, which could hopefully be possibly tomorrow, but we don't know that for sure. So I'm wondering if we should just kind of have a backup sentence to throw in there in case we are still in the purple tier, that it's something that when we get into the tier that allows the 25% or the 100 people, whichever is less, I just want to make sure it matches to where we are, because right now it doesn't.
Thank you, Vice Mayor O'Brien, for bringing that up. Staff, is that something we can, it sounds like that's something we can address if colleagues are comfortable with that?
We can take care of that.
Okay. That sounds good. Colleagues, does anybody else have questions or concerns about the letter? Don't see any. I'm sorry, City Manager Goldman, did you have a comment?
No, just that I do know that Mr. Hutar from the Convention Visitors Bureau is on. I also saw some of our hoteliers on, so I know that at least Mr. Hutar was hoping to speak. So when you open up for public comment,
Yeah.
we do. People.
Sure thing, sure thing. I just want to see if colleagues have any other questions at this time, and we'll thank the Economic Development Subcommittee that's done so much work over the past year, but for bringing this to our attention so we could address it as a team. So thank you for that. Colleagues, if we don't have any additional questions at this time, let's open it up to public comment. And I think it does make sense to allow Mr. Hutar to kick us off, and go ahead and introduce yourself. And you've got 3 minutes for sure. And thank you for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Beach and Vice Mayor O'Brien and council members. I wanted to share on behalf of the tourism community our appreciation for you taking this letter forward. It appears that this issue of meeting has just sort of gotten stuck, and we're hopeful that your letter will give it the fulcrum, some energy to break that loose. The hotels have worked very hard for months to develop safety sanitation protocols, distancing protocols, studied their air units, number of exchanges of air per hour, etc. Most of them are large brand affiliated, and those companies have partnered with name brand partners, be it Lysol, Clorox, Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins University. So I think we're well poised. I know from our affiliation with Cal Travel, which is the tourism legislative arm, that the subject is being discussed, or at least it was brought forward to the governor's office. But a little push will go a long way. And if some of the other hotel partners are here and wish to speak, they can elaborate further on those protocols. But this came as a result of our meeting with the economic subcommittee meeting, and we're grateful to have been heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutar. We really appreciate you being here tonight, and for being a great community partner through everything, but particularly at these challenging times. Do we have any other members of the public who wish to speak at this time? Any other members of the hotel community?
Ms. Kirshner's there, Mayor Beach, in case you can't see her.
I can't see her, but if she's got her hand up, go ahead. Ms. Kirshner, thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Mayor Beach. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, yes.
Wonderful. And good evening, Vice Mayor O'Brien, City Manager Ms. Goldman, and members of the council. Thank you so much for giving us just a few minutes. I echo what John Hutar just represented. I represent Marriott Hotels, as some of you might know, and as one of the largest, maybe the largest hotel brand in the world, we have the most stringent and I would say, dare say, one of the toughest safety and sanitation and cleanliness programs implemented almost immediately when COVID hit us back in March. I just want you to be rest assured that I dare say even safer than a place of worship or a museum or a mall. We definitely keep up to date with WHO, CDC, as well as our own doctor on staff with Marriott International. I just want you to have a lot of assurance that if anyone anywhere is going to have a meeting, our hotels are definitely safe, and we will ensure that we keep up that wonderful fund, that general fund that needs rebuilding. So thank you in advance.
Thank you, Ms. Kirshner. We appreciate you being with us tonight. Do we
Kevin
have any?
Peck from the Hyatt is also here. I see he's unmasked himself, so he probably wants to say something.
Thank you so much. If you can unmute and go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Beach, Vice Mayor O'Brien, and City Council. Just a quick word to say thanks for your support of everything that's happening in the hotel business and trying to get us back on track and get some business back into our hotels. We really, we couldn't do it without your help. And by the time that you've taken to listen to us, prepare a draft letter and be sending that to the governor on our behalf and on the city of Burlingame's behalf, we sincerely appreciate it. You've got a lot on your agenda, and by the time that you've taken to spend with us, listen to us, and react the way that you have means the world to us. So thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Kresh. We appreciate you being here with us as well and for participating in the conversation. If we, I see the Vice Mayor has her hand up. Do you have a question for one of the hoteliers, or if we have some additional comments, I can keep public comment open, but if you had a question, I want to give you that opportunity right now, Vice Mayor O'Brien.
No, I don't have a question. I have a comment once you close the
Okay.
public hearing.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to speak on this? I see Ms. Lind has her hand up. Is that the next one in the queue, Madam City Clerk?
Correct.
Go ahead, Ms. Lind. You've got 3 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Beach and Madam Vice Mayor, members of the council and city staff. Julie with the San Mateo Labor Council. I won't take much of your time on this item, at least. Wanted to thank you for approaching the governor and the legislature to ask them to allow these gatherings of 50 or less to take place at your hotels. We at the Labor Council represent many of those hotel workers and also tens of thousands of the workers at SFO, which is the impetus for a lot of these incoming events. So we are very much in favor of anything that allows our folks to get back to work with all of the safety protocols adhered to. We would just ask that, should this be approved, that you all do whatever you can to ensure that, sorry, the cat's trying to eat my phone cord, to ensure that the workforce is brought back on the same upswing as the hotel businesses, or hotel business rather, is regained. There have been some challenges in the past with employers being pretty slow to bring back their workforce even when business has improved. So we'd like to make sure that this is something that benefits obviously your city, the hotels, the airport, but also employees as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lind, for your comments. Do we have any other members of the public who wish to speak?
I have no one with their hand up, so I don't think so.
Okay, with that, we will go ahead and again thank Vice Mayor O'Brien and Councilmember Ortiz for their work with the hoteliers on this proposed letter. Vice Mayor O'Brien, would you like to go ahead with your comment?
Yes, I have a suggestion. I'm wondering if it would be helpful to attach the safety and sanitation protocols to the letter. So the governor and his office have a better idea of what protocols are going to be in place, so that they really do see how safety precautions will be implemented.
I think that sounds like a great idea. Do colleagues have any concerns or questions on that? And is that achievable from our staff's perspective?
That is no problem. Perhaps Mr. Hutar can just shoot that over to me tomorrow morning.
Sounds good.
I think I'd like to second that motion.
Sure, I have one other, if we are tweaking a little bit of language, I was just wondering if it would be acceptable to colleagues based on some of the comments we got tonight, where it says, you know, on behalf of the city's hoteliers, the city council therefore requests that organized gatherings. I think we're also talking about on behalf of the city's hoteliers and their workforce members, that the city council therefore requests that organized gatherings up to 50 people could be permitted. I think that would be a compelling point for the governor, that this is more than, it's certainly for the hoteliers, it's certainly for the benefit of the city of Burlingame, but also our workforce members as well. Councilmember Ortiz, do you have would you like to make a motion?
I would like to move to approve the letter as amended. Good catch, Vice Mayor. And I like your amendment and including the sanitation. So that's my motion.
Okay, thank you,
I'll second
Councilmember
that.
Ortiz, and a second from Vice Mayor O'Brien. We'll take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes. All right, great work on that. Thank you again to the Economic Development Subcommittee and staff and all the hoteliers who participated. We appreciate it. I think that takes care of our consent calendar, if I'm not mistaken. That covers all four items. So we're moving on now to item 9A, which is a public hearing, which is actually, we've got kind of a complicated item here. We have a proposed ordinance. We have 3 resolutions, and it's related to a property in an area even that could amend our downtown specific plan. We will just go ahead and turn this over. I think this is probably going to our Community Development Director, Kevin Gardner, for further explanation and context, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Mayor Beach and members of the council. I will in fact turn it over to our planning manager, who has been the project planner for this project and has prepared a presentation for you this evening.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Currently, the Donnelly Avenue Commercial or DAC District zoning regulations and the Donnelly Avenue area within the downtown specific plan do not permit residential uses of any type. With this application, the applicant is requesting that the council consider amending the DAC district zoning regulations and the downtown specific plan to allow multifamily residential uses above the first floor only on those properties that lie north of Donnelly Avenue that have sole frontage on Donnelly. And if Megan, if you can put up that slide, please. Yes. If we can go to the next slide, please. So it's the area that's shown in yellow there. This would include the project site, which consists of 3 lots, 2 public parking lots, and 1 lot east of the project site. The rationale for this amendment is that these properties are adjacent to multifamily residential uses to the rear, which face Bellevue Avenue, and as such would be compatible with the adjacent residential uses. Staff would note that multifamily residential uses are currently permitted within several of the downtown districts, including the Bayswater mixed use, Howard mixed use, California Drive Auto Row, and Myrtle mixed use districts. The proposed code amendment language is consistent with these other districts, except that it would allow multifamily residential only above the first floor in order to maintain the importance of keeping a commercial presence on the ground floor. Next slide, please. Related to the request for these amendments is an application for construction of a new 3-story mixed-use commercial residential development at 1214 to 1220 Donnelly Avenue. The project consists of 4,700 square feet of commercial use on the ground floor and 14 residential condominium units on the 2nd and 3rd floors. Parking for 23 vehicles will be provided in an enclosed garage located behind the commercial space. Applications required for this project include a mitigated negative declaration, design review, conditional use permit for height, condominium permit, and lastly, a lot combination to combine 3 lots into 1. On August 10th of this year, the commission reviewed the proposed project, including the amendment to the DAC district and the downtown specific plan. The commission voted to recommend approval of the applicant's requests. Since this council is the final decision-making body regarding the request to amend the DAC district and the downtown specific plan, the commission's action was in the form of a recommendation to City Council. The applicant is here tonight and has a brief presentation prepared. But first, do you have any questions for staff?
Thank you, Mr. Hearn. We appreciate your presentation. I'd like to, yes, go ahead before we kind of officially introduce the ordinance and open up the public hearing. Let's see if anybody has questions of staff, or would anybody like to share any ex parte communications that we need to mention tonight. I see Councilmember Brownrigg has his hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not here to report ex parte communications. I haven't had any with any recent, no recent calls. I mean, 2 years ago, perhaps. But the reason for my question is I wanted to probe. So first of all, thank you for the staff report. Thank you for the hard work of the Planning Commission, because I've been tracking this project over the course of its application, and I really think it's gotten a lot better with commission input. So appreciate both the developer listening and the commission doing its work. My question is a policy question concerning the rezoning of the DAC, and in particular, why we don't use this opportunity to expand those properties eligible for housing above the first floor. And in particular, I'm thinking about our very own parking lots, because in the past we have looked at Lot C and whatever the lot is that's across from Il Fornaio as potentially redevelopable. And I wondered if this was an opportunity to think bigger than just those 3 or 4 properties. And maybe this is a conversation for later this evening, but I wanted to flag that question now.
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. I appreciate that question. With this application came just a request to rezone just this strip of properties here. It's certainly something that we can look at in the future and perhaps do maybe a grouping of those sites and bring that forward as one ordinance. In this particular case, the request just came for this piece here, so we followed that request.
And if I may, Madam Mayor, just to follow up, I understand the logic completely. The developer doesn't need a broader rezoning. It does feel to me, though, that it might be logical to do it if for bureaucratic reasons, if that's complicated and we should just let it go this way, I'll be okay with that. But I would suggest that we, re-look at that. And in particular, to rezone the areas that we might actually be able to control makes a certain amount of sense to me. So anyway, thank you.
Through the mayor, just to answer that, the CEQA on this didn't anticipate a broader rezone. So I think at this point, we can't kind of reopen that, but that's certainly something that staff can take up very quickly and bring back to the council for consideration. This rezoning does sweep in the entirety of that side of the street. So there's an additional parcel that wasn't controlled by the developer, just for logical consistency. But it doesn't have a broader reach than that.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I still think it's a good idea. So for the future.
Thanks, Councilmember Brownrigg. Councilmember Ortiz, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have had many conversations with the applicant. Just want to let that be known.
Thank you for that disclosure. Councilmember Coulson, go ahead.
Also contacted me regarding this project.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson. And any other questions or comments from colleagues? All right, seeing none, then at this time, we'll sort of begin our official procedure. And we will go ahead and ask the city clerk to read the title of the ordinance. And well, I guess we need a motion to for the city clerk to do so.
You can just ask. Yeah, she can read it, and then the motion is to introduce.
All right, then I decree that the city clerk should please read the title. Thank you for keeping me honest in procedure here tonight.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Burlingame amending Title 25 zoning code, code section 25.36.020 of the Burlingame Municipal Code to allow multifamily residential uses above the first floor on properties located north of Donnelly Avenue that have sole frontage on Donnelly Avenue as a permitted use in the Donnelly Avenue Commercial DAC District.
Motion to introduce, Madam Mayor, and waive further reading.
Second.
Thank you. And I guess we'll go ahead and do a vote.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes. All right, so at this time, we will officially conduct a public hearing to consider all the public testimony related to this ordinance. And if it's all right with staff, should we begin with the applicant at this point? Madam City Attorney, looks like you were about to say something.
Yeah, just to clarify for the record that this hearing will cover the ordinance and all of the related items on the staff report, so you don't have to do it twice.
Okay, excellent. So this is sort of the one big bucket for public, for members of the public to comment on any aspect of the ordinance, yes, all the various aspects of this resolution and ordinance. Okay, with that, should we go ahead and see if the applicant would like to speak at this time, or other members of the public will give control to the city clerk and you can manage the public comment at this time.
So, Madam Mayor, Mark Hudak, appearing on behalf of John Britton and his family. And I have with us tonight Gary G., the project architect. He will speak to some of the design elements on this project. So we're very pleased to bring this.
And thank you, Mr. Hudak. Just a moment, let me get clarification from the city attorney. Do we have a certain time limit that's different for applicants as opposed to regular members of the public?
Yes, by tradition for planning projects, because of the complexity of the number of items that have to be addressed, the project proponent gets a little more time. Members of the public who aren't directly connected to the project get their regular 3 minutes each.
Okay, and what would be an appropriate amount of time for the applicant? So we keep.
Usually we target around 10 minutes.
Okay, all right. So thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Hudak. We'll give you folks 10 minutes, however you want to divide that. And we thank you all for joining us this evening.
Very well, thank you very much. And 10 minutes was our target given to us in advance. So we're very pleased to bring this project to you for its final approval process. We were 3 times in front of the Planning Commission in order to refine the design details. Everything was thoroughly vetted and approved. And we think the project meets all the planning and design criteria. So what we really need is an amendment to the zoning ordinance to allow residential use above the first floor. I'll speak briefly to that because we think this amendment makes sense. First, because there is a residential use immediately behind the project site and the area that would be affected by the zoning amendment. And this project, and maybe others in the future, will provide the good buffer that is expected to make the transition between residential and commercial. Also, at one time, this was residential property, at least in part. So it makes sense to continue at least partial residential use in this location. I think most important, by having this kind of mixed use project, will activate what has been a very dead zone in the downtown area. And we think that having residential will allow more patronage of nearby visits. I know the neighbors, the owners of neighboring properties and the tenants are very enthused to have something go up on these lots finally. And as far as I know, there's been no opposition to the project. So we think we're in a position to move forward. Speaking very briefly to Mr. Brownrigg's point, we did at one time consider asking for a more expansive zoning amendment to take in the parking lots across the street. But some of the CEQA issues and then the buffering issues became probably more than we wanted to take on, and felt like when the city's ready to rezone its parking lots, it'll be ready to do so. So with that, let me ask Gary G to step in, share his screen, and he'll go over the design elements that we finally arrived at in consultation with the Planning Commission, and then we'll answer any questions that you have. Thank you all.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I can get the first image, which is the rendering, we sent our PDF presentation down. Okay, this is just the image that was in your packet. It's We have about 146 foot of frontage. As you can see, the ground floor is very visibly commercial with the 15-foot ceiling. There's residential units on the second and third floor. Some of these units are recessed with balconies overlooking Donnelly. Let's go to the second image, please. This is just a breakdown, a very quick breakdown of the project for you, where we have about 4,704 gross square feet of commercial space on the ground floor. On the second and third floors, we have approximately 13,907 gross square feet of 14 residential units, 12 which are 2 bedrooms and 2 which are 1 bedrooms. Our parking, as the planner had mentioned to you, we have 23 spaces, 22 for the residential and 1 service vehicle. We also have 8 residential bicycle spaces and 1 for commercial. The building height, as you see the building on the image, is 40 feet 10 inches to the top of the roof and 54 feet 3 3/4 inches to the stair penthouse. The next image, please. Here you see, again, 3 lots combined. This is just a site plan, and to your left, you see the municipal lot on Donnelly. Next image. This is sort of the ground floor. In the lower portion of the plan is the commercial space. To the right is the residential entry and the back of house utilities. Upper part of the plan, you'll see the 23 parking spaces for the ground floor. It's 100% lot coverage. Next image, please. This is both the second and third floor typical. There's a lot of information on these drawings, but basically, as we said before, it's 7 units per floor. You have 6 2-bedroom units on each floor with 1 one-bedroom unit. Next image, please. This is just a quick elevation that shows you the type of variation of the design and the design review that we went through with the Planning Commission with 3 Planning Commission presentations and revisions. And the final image is really again, the rendering, which is an accurate 3D image is what you can see. Again, you see the commercial, 2 large commercial spaces in the center there. There's a gated entry for the residential area, which is surrounded by that what we call creeping bougainvillea. And then to the right is more the utility, garbage type of information service for the building. And I'm available to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much for the presentation. You folks have more time if you'd like. You have about a little less than 5 minutes. Are there any other comments from the applicant?
Madam Mayor, Mark again. Why don't we reserve those 5 minutes in case somebody speaks and we'd like to address something? Otherwise, I feel like this has been thoroughly studied. The staff report was careful in pointing out all of the things that are necessary to approve this project. It's really a simple project. It just looks complicated in your staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Hudak. With that, we'll see if any, we appreciate the applicant being here and the overview of the presentation. And we had a very thorough meeting materials that the staff prepared for us, including beautiful large renderings. So we appreciate the preparation that went into this decision that the whole team put together for us. Do we have other members of the public who wish to speak on this item, Madam City Clerk?
I do not have any emails and I don't see anyone with their hand up. So I think we're good.
So we'll give the public one last chance. If you're calling in by phone, you can dial *9 and we'll know you've raised your hand. If you would like to raise your hand, you can go to the participant window and use the raise hand feature. And we'll just give one more moment to make sure everybody's had an opportunity. I don't see any other hands raised. With that, we will close the public hearing. Okay, colleagues, this is our opportunity to deliberate of all the different proposals here. If we have any other additional questions, and there's a number of different ways we can approach this. We can take all the items together at once and discuss them holistically. We can take each individual, the individual ordinance or the resolutions individually. It's really up to us based on our deliberations right now. So would anybody like to begin with big picture comments on this project and the proposal that staff prepared for us? Councilmember Coulson, I see your hands up. Go ahead and kick us off.
So I'm very enthusiastic about this project. I think it's an opportunity to add more housing. It's a perfect location, near transit, shopping, and our civic assets. And I think it's just going to be a wonderful addition to the neighborhood. My office is right there, and I'm looking forward to having new retail and the diversity of housing. But I also want to just tip my hat to especially Vice Mayor O'Brien and Councilman Brownrigg, who were on the council, and Councilmember Ortiz came a little later, and worked up the specific plan for the downtown area that kicked off the welcoming of housing into the heart of Burlingame, and were able to sort of foresee how this important combination that frankly has historically been a part of Burlingame, always having housing in our downtown, always having a mix of retail, housing, and office down there, and creating that nice balance and vibrancy. So thank you for being so fortuitous. I'm apologetic to the applicant that it actually took so long to get through, but I appreciate their perseverance and willingness to continue working with the city to get this important project through.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson, for your comments. Councilmember Ortiz, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did want to echo most of what the Councilmember Coulson just said, and just want to add, I've been following this whole project and the whole process since the former structure burnt down. As far as the rezoning, I think it makes perfect sense. It fits with everything we want the downtown to look like. And it also fits with our stated goal of increasing housing in the area and in the city, and specifically in that area. So I am very much in favor of the rezoning. I think the project, after a few iterations, I think we've arrived at something that's going to be a jewel to that part of the town. I think it looks great. I think it's going to add a lot of vibrancy. And again, I am also looking forward to seeing it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ortiz. Vice Mayor O'Brien.
I would just have to echo that I think, zoning this area for housing is a smart choice, considering there is housing behind this project. It's close to public transportation. I mean, it is the perfect location. And so I do commend the architect and Mr. Britton in regard to the aesthetics of this project. You've articulated it quite well. I actually should have asked this earlier. I mean, it doesn't make a difference to me, but it's more out of maybe curiosity. I do have 2 questions. So is it possible through the mayor that I can ask those questions?
Of course. Thank you.
So the 2 questions I have is, I notice on the back elevation, there are a lot of power lines in the back, and you have that metal guardrail, and those power lines are somewhat low. Is there any concern in regards to safety around those power lines? That's my first question. And then my second question is, have you thought of actually putting the planter boxes closer to that railing, so kind of flipping where those planter boxes are currently? So it's not the pedestrian that's closest to the rail, it's the planter boxes that are closest to the railing.
Thank you for the questions, Vice Mayor O'Brien. Do we, we could open the public hearing back up, but we can go ahead and see if staff wants to address those, if those were discussed at all, if they have any comments. And then if not, staff, if you'd like to bring the applicant in as well to address those issues of power line safety and the planter boxes.
Sure, I think the power line safety question can be answered by the architect. That question was asked by the commission as well. The Planning Commission also discussed quite in detail the location of the planter boxes, because originally they did have the planter boxes along the rear edge there. In the third iteration, I believe they've switched them back to be closer to the building. But in the Planning Commission's recommendation, they did suggest that those planter boxes be switched back to the edge for that same very reason, to create more of a buffer and to keep pedestrians or residents away from that edge. And it's something that they thought that staff can handle with the architect to make sure that that's done prior to issuance of a building permit. Perhaps the applicant can also speak to that.
If I can interject. So Ruben, are you saying then that has been agreed upon and it's just will be done between staff and the applicant?
Correct.
Okay, that's great.
Okay, thank you for that, Vice Mayor O'Brien. I'm going to see if Councilmember Brownrigg has any questions first before, just in case there's another question for the applicant, and then we can.
No, Madam Mayor.
No, okay. So then if the applicant, I want to give the applicant the opportunity, if you have anything further to add based on what staff mentioned regarding the Vice Mayor's question, you can go ahead and have the opportunity to respond right now. If not, that's okay too. Mr. Hudak?
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, I think those lines back there are just telephone lines and the power is underground. Gary might have more information on that. And then on with regard to the planter boxes, it went back and forth. And we agreed to reconsider it, but we didn't want to bring anything forward to you that was different from the plans that were ultimately approved by the Planning Commission. So we said we would relook at the positioning of the planter boxes, and we will.
Thank you, Mr. Hudak. Vice Mayor O'Brien, are you satisfied with those answers?
So we are sure then they're utility lines and not power lines?
That's what I'm being told. Gary, are you still on?
Yes, I am. They're mostly communication lines, telephone lines, and that type of non-power lines. What we're going to probably do anyway is probably we'll have our surveyor shoot the height of those lines and sort of overlay it on our drawings before we start construction, and then contact any necessary utilities to either have the lines either relocated or somehow raised. They may be, I don't know what their plans are to put those underground. So I think that it was brought up during the Planning Commission. We made note of it that we'd have to address it. So it's on our list. I appreciate your bringing it up.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. G.
Okay, thank you. With that, Councilmember Brownrigg, did you have any comments or additional questions?
Well, Madam Mayor, in light of, and I recognize that you've not had a chance to opine yourself, but in light of the widely positive remarks by council and moving us along, I was going to make a motion to approve this or to go ahead and publish and to approve the rezoning all at once. I haven't heard any controversy over that element of it. So I would suggest that we do take it all at once. I will say, first of all, I appreciate Mr. Hudak's comments. I didn't ever expect this applicant to have to do the work of rezoning, and I just didn't think about CEQA. So I think that is on the city, but I would suggest that it would behoove us to go down that road. And then I will, you take me out of the Planning Commission, you can't take Planning Commission out of me. So I just want to echo one of the other comments that was made by the commission, and that was if there's an ability to look at additional ornamentation on the tower that faces Donnelly, I think that's an opportunity. I think that may be a rather blank wall otherwise, but I'm not in any way trying to recommission this. So with all of that said, I would make a motion to bring this back for action and go ahead and adopt the rezoning.
I'll second.
So thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg and Vice Mayor O'Brien. I would concur. My only other comments would be that I do agree. I think the Planning Commission did a great job. I agree with their findings. I think the applicants did a great job. It's been a long road for members of the public who may be wondering about, affordability. This particular project has been going for a long time and it predated our affordable housing fees or our in lieu units, but this is going to be a great project that enhances the downtown and is beautiful. And I don't have any further comments. I think the Planning Commission did a great job on tweaking it and creating a terrific project. So what I heard is that we agree with the Planning Commission findings and that we could take, I talked with the city attorney in advance, approval of all 4 items at once. And I think what I heard Councilmember Brownrigg say is that we would adopt the resolution to amend the general plan and the downtown specific plan and the ordinance to allow multifamily residential uses above the first floor in the North Donnelly area, to accept the mitigated negative declaration regarding CEQA, and the application to approve the design review. Is that correct, Councilmember Brownrigg?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's exactly what I meant to say.
All right, then we've got a
I
motion
appreciate that.
from
Second.
Councilmember Brownrigg and I think the Vice Mayor seconded earlier. Is that
May-
correct?
Yes.
Madam Mayor, just before you call for the vote,
Yes.
one of your comments triggered for the city attorney. Would the city attorney like us to more specifically adopt the findings for why housing is in our interest? It seems so self-evident to me, and I think to all of us. But obviously, when you make a zoning change, you need to have findings. Does the city attorney feel that we've had enough of a discussion about this council's, and Councilwoman Colson was very eloquent about this council's effort to find additional room for housing and availability is really longstanding, but I do want to just double check with her, Madam Mayor, if we've done an adequate job on the findings.
I highly endorse and appreciate the question. But yes, I think that the administrative record is adequate on that, both from the Planning Commission and from here. So thank you for checking in though.
Very
Okay.
good.
With that, I think we have a motion from Councilmember Brownrigg and a second from Vice Mayor O'Brien. Let's take a roll call vote.
Councilmember Colson,
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
Yes. That the motion passes unanimously. So thanks and congratulations to Mr. Hudak, his team, and of course, Mr. Britton for a great project. And thanks to the Planning Commission for their hard work that brought us here and staff that rolled everything up and worked so hard to make this project a reality. So now we'll see great things happen. And a lot
All right,
of,
great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time this evening.
thank you, Mr. Hudak. All right. Moving on to item 10A, we have a resolution to consider regarding suspending some conditional use permit timelines for 778 Burl Way during evaluation of an alternative development plan. We'll pass this over to our city staff for additional context and comment.
Thank you, Mayor Beach, members of the council. The request is to allow a suspension of timelines embedded in the October 2016 conditional use permit for 778 Burl Way Road. As background, the conditional use permit, or CUP as it's often referred to, initially anticipated the relocation of the existing rental car operations on the site to the then planned SFO car rental facility. The CUP was structured around a redevelopment of that site with the expectation that the car rental operation would eventually be relocated. Since that time, SFO abandoned the plans for that rental car facility, so this has involved a pivot of the CUP. Instead it's focusing on a mixed development scenario where rental car operations would remain on the site, but in a consolidated parking structure, and then the remainder of the site would be available for other uses. In order to work through these changes, Enterprise, which is the property owner and applicant, was granted 2 9-month suspensions of the CUP timelines so that they could put together this revised development plan and get back on track. Most recently, on March 16th of this year, the City Council held a study session to review Enterprise's preliminary concept for the site as part of a larger discussion that also involved community benefit zoning for the Bayfront Commercial District. The next day, shelter in place came down into effect, and as we know, it's caused disruptions all over the place. So given the challenges of the past 6 months, Enterprise has requested a further 6-month suspension so they can get back on track. Enterprise representatives have indicated that they are confident that they can now resume the work on developing the planned concept and are requesting that the tolling be made so that they can make up for the last time of the last 6 months. The lost time. And together with the 2 previous extensions, they believe this will provide sufficient time to put together a full development proposal package. The request from Enterprise is included with the staff report as a letter, and representatives of Enterprise are here for questions. But first, I'm available for questions of staff.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Colleagues, do we have questions for Mr. Gardner or his team at this time? Don't see anybody's hand up. With that, we don't have any questions for staff, then let's go ahead and open public comment at this time. And if it's okay with the city clerk, we'll make sure that Enterprise has a chance to speak first.
Sure. Does someone from Enterprise want to speak?
Sure. This is Doug Hattori. I'm with Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and I want to thank you, Mayor Beach and Vice Mayor O'Brien and members of the council for letting us have this resolution on the agenda tonight. You know, as Kevin mentioned, in the March study session, we were prepared to move forward with getting more detailed drawings and renderings of our development plan for the site, as well as, you know, talk about the transaction for community use. And unfortunately, you know, I don't have to go about what happened over the last 6 months, but I think what I'm hoping we can do is pretend like this, that March study session happened tonight instead of in March, because I think, I don't want to say we are back to normal by any means, but we are at a point where we are no longer in a 911 situation of trying to operate our business. So when we kind of started talking about what we need to start working on that we were working on pre-COVID, this was obviously the first thing that came on to our sites. And, you know, realizing that we have kind of lost the last 6 months due to this COVID, we were just asking for one more extension. And like Kevin says, we feel like we can proceed now and move forward and try and get this deal done. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Hattori. We appreciate that. Are there any other members of the public who would like to comment on this item?
I have no emails. No one has their hand up and no chats.
Okay. And if you've joined us by phone and you want to speak on this item, you can dial *9 and we'll know that's how you're raising your hand. Give everybody one more moment. I don't see any hands up, so we will go ahead and close public comment at this time. Colleagues, would anybody like to kick off our deliberations or make additional comments? I don't see anybody. Oh, I see Councilmember Brownrigg. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll speak in favor of this delay. You know, as we all know, we are a heavily travel and tourist centric economy here in the city of Burlingame. So we are especially aware of the impacts to business travel. It's not lost on any of us that since COVID, you know, Hertz actually filed for bankruptcy and everybody is struggling. I will say that as one of the members of the ad hoc working group with Councilwoman Coulson to negotiate some of these terms with Enterprise, I would like to suggest that we continue those lines of dialogue, Mr. Hattori. The Enterprise has always been very willing to make sure that we can talk, but I think it's important for us as we represent to our citizens that there's momentum, notwithstanding COVID, that it'd be useful to make sure that we keep that cadence of meetings going, Madam Mayor. So I stand in favor of the 6 months. I think it's a natural extension, but I also think we owe it to our constituents to make sure that there is forward motion and stuff. And I know that Enterprise wants the same thing. So that's how I'm looking at this, and I stand in favor of the proposal.
Thank you, Councilmember Brownrigg. Appreciate your comments. I'm not sure. Let's see. Go ahead, Councilmember Ortiz. go ahead next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to say I've been reluctantly approving extensions on this site of one CUP or another since I joined the council. That is a little frustrating, but this one makes sense. I think it's something we have to do. And I just really, really want to see progress on this project. So with that, I will support the motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Ortiz. Councilmember Keegren, go ahead.
My comments actually have already been mentioned. I just wanted to elaborate on the importance of the subcommittee meeting with Enterprise. So I would actually like that meeting definitely scheduled within the next 2 months.
Thank you, Vice Mayor O'Brien. We appreciate that. Councilmember Coulson, go ahead.
So I just want to point out that this is not an extension of the CUP because the CUP is still winding up in October of, I believe, 2023. And so what it is just a tolling. If you all recall, it was a complicated conversation a number of years ago where what we had set up here was a sort of an estimate of what the TOT or the opportunity cost of having that be one use versus another. And then we had basically indicated to the applicant that they would have to meet certain guidelines and standards along the way to show that they were moving it toward something other than, the current use, or that they were trying to figure out how to small up their footprint or something. And so that is all we're tolling, is just the financial benchmarks that were in there, and we're just pushing those off to October of 2022. We're not eliminating them, we're just pushing them down the road. And I'm perfectly happy to do that. I don't think this was ever about the financial situation. It's about trying to figure out how to work with a long-standing business who's been a good partner in our city and figure out a way to continue to help them move into a 21st century management of car rental, and at a time when things are changing, and ironically now changing back probably to people wanting their own car and their own car rental versus what they had been pre-COVID. And also with the sort of AB5 sitting on our proposition, depending on how that goes, the car sharing and Uber, Lyft, et cetera, may not even exist after this. So I think working with them in a really quickly changing business environment is really helpful and really important. And I think it's a hallmark of Burlingame City Council to be forward-looking and flexible. So I appreciate very much my colleagues' willingness to work with us on this, and look forward to working with Councilman Brownrigg on an updated meeting with our colleagues at Enterprise.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson. I think everybody's had a chance to speak, and I agree. I think there's once we kind of figured out how to move forward with this, everybody's really been working in good faith. And it certainly is reasonable that COVID has just messed up a lot of timelines. So I do like Vice Mayor O'Brien's recommendation that Councilmember and Councilmember Brownrigg suggested it too. It sounds like Councilmember Coulson's willing to have that subcommittee meet within the next 2 months or so, just to have that checkpoint. And we do appreciate the ongoing communication that Enterprise has engaged with us on. So with that, would somebody like to propose a motion?
I'll propose motion. Let me make sure I get this right. Adopt a resolution further suspending the timeliness embedded in the October 2016 conditional use permit extension granted to the Enterprise property for an additional 6 months.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion made by Councilmember Coulson, second by Councilmember Ortiz. We'll take our roll call vote.
Councilmember Coulson?
Yes.
Councilmember Brownrigg?
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz?
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien?
Yes.
Mayor Beach?
Yes. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And thank you to Enterprise for being with us tonight. Item 10B, we will at this point review some financial information. We asked our wonderful finance department in considering COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on municipal budgets that we wanted an extra check-in this fall. So this is an opportunity for our finance team to give us sort of an update on not only our end of year fiscal year 1920 unaudited results, but also where it looks like we're kind of headed based on information since our last budget discussion this past spring. So with that, we'll turn it over. I don't know if the city manager would like to speak or if we'll go directly to our finance director.
We are going directly to our finance director, Carol Augustine.
Thank you.
Okay, and I think we have the presentation up. I'm not seeing the presentation. Thank you. So you'll notice the staff report follows a similar format to our other financial updates, such as the mid-year report. We didn't include any economic overview in this report. It's been 6 months since the Bay Area shelter-in-place order first went into effect, and a solid reopening is coming later than initially expected. And social unrest and wildfire crisis and the political environment has really only added to the economic uncertainty that we acknowledged when the budget was passed in June. But there are some positive trends of recent note. So while I think everyone is pretty well aware of what the economy looks like, and there's been no significant changes in reliable economic forecasts, there is some economic data that supports the discussion of municipal revenues. So I've added this to the presentation. And then we'll talk about the report itself, which is, there's an overview on the next slide. Okay. The finance department has been working very hard to close the books on the year ended June 30th, 2020. I may have noted in the staff report that the first 3 months of the fiscal year we're working on our old financial system, and then we implemented the Munis financial system along with a new chart of accounts on October 1st. We had about 5 months to get used to it, which we're thankful for when the pandemic put a real damper on all our operations. We continue to push forward, however. We will be closing the books. We're working with HR to implement the human capital management modules in Munis in September and a new utility billing system in the spring. But for now, we can tell you we have a pretty good handle on general fund for the fiscal year 2019-20. The staff report talks about revenue results, operating expenditures, and the general fund balance. And as for implications for the current fiscal year, there are a lot of points of interest, which we'll touch on, but nothing that warrants a change in the general fund projections, other than the anticipated reimbursement, which we're currently receiving of the Coronavirus Relief Fund. Next slide. On the next slide, we show that the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting every aspect of the economic landscape. Thankfully, we see that cases are finally going down. They were increasing nationally at an alarming rate beginning at the beginning of June, peaking in late July before beginning to slow. California cases are represented in the orange band. You can see that New York, which is the green band, experienced the most cases early on, but managed to control growth in the number of cases in the state since that time. On the next slide, we show unemployment rates. And in fact, the next few slides show that currently the US economy is characterized by early signs of recovery after a significant negative start to 2020, an improving labor market after reaching historic low levels and persistently low inflationary pressures. we all know that the consistent employment growth that was enjoyed in the past few years, actually since the Great Recession, came to an abrupt halt due to the pandemic beginning in March. Unemployment peaked in April and May, as shown in the table within this chart. You can see that California continues to experience a higher unemployment rate statewide than in the nation as a whole. And you may have read about job gains in the month of August, accounted in the Bay Area, accounted for nearly a third of all the jobs added in California. However, California's unemployment department has put a pause on new claims until October 5th so that it can implement a new identity verification tool. This should help speed up the claims process, but they have a massive backlog of claims that will not likely be fully cleared until early next year, 2021. Next slide. Average wages appear to rise, basically emphasizing that lower wage earners are the hardest hit by the pandemic driven unemployment. A greater proportion of jobs lost were in personal services and the hospitality and restaurant sectors. So this chart shows for 3 years leading up to the pandemic and the impact of the sudden escalation in unemployment. And in the most recent quarterly investment reports for the past 2 quarters, we spoke about how the Federal Reserve acted very promptly to stabilize the market and try and support the recovery. This set of charts shows the Federal Reserve's economic projections as of June, which are shown in the darker bars. I thought this was really interesting when you compare it to the projections at their September 16th meeting. They're in general not quite as optimistic as in June, but perhaps not very much so, indicating just a slightly slower recovery than they anticipated in June, but not drastically different. Next slide. And this slide is from a recent PFM, our investment managers and camp presentation, shows that economists expect a very strong Q3 growth following the second quarter's contraction of 31.7% nationwide. A forecast of 26.2 GDP growth is anticipated for the current quarter, with moderate growth after that quarter. So we should be much more informed at mid-year. If I sound like I'm pushing it off, in reality, we just don't know too much more than we knew when we adopted the budget in June. So next slide. Back to Burlingame, spoiler alert. In summary, revenues were 1.4 million higher than expected, and the city experienced 4.5 million in budgetary savings. So instead of the general fund balance decreasing by the 11.8 million in the adjusted budget, it decreased only 6 million. And the result is an unassigned fund balance of over 13.3 million rather than the 8.3 million balance in the adjusted budget. The city's top 3 revenues, property taxes, TOT, and sales and use tax, are 58.3 million. They're included in that tax revenue. That's 82.6% of our tax revenue and most of our general fund revenue. We'll look at those really closely. Permits and fees are discussed in the report. They were adjusted at mid-year, but we were rarely uncertain as to how much to adjust them by. I won't discuss those further. We're still pretty much in the dark as to how charges for services will recover. We'll know more about that at mid-year. And investment income also is covered in the report. We cover that in each quarterly investment report. So I won't get into that tonight, except to confirm that there will be an additional $2 million of interest income shown in the city's comprehensive annual financial report for the year. This is an unrealized gain, and because the city generally holds its investments until maturity, we simply don't budget for this variable. Next slide. So this is the same slide, same table as shown in the staff report, page 3. It's a good reference tool as we talk explicitly about our big 3 revenues. Next slide. For property taxes, this table is on page 4. Burlingame's property taxes are strong, and there's not a lot of variance due to the fact that the roll was pretty well established prior to the fiscal year. Plus, the projection is adjusted at mid-year for variable portions like the ERAF refunds. There was a lot of discussion about the ERAF fund and in lieu VLF payments in the 2019-20 mid-year report. We're hoping that there won't be as much uncertainty around these payments once the state controller's office issues guidance on ERAF calculations. That is sorely needed, and that should stabilize these payments a lot. Okay, for TOT, the hotel tax, the hotel sector does remain the hardest hit sector by the drop in business travel and lower levels of leisure travel. And the employment in accommodation services increased by more than 15,000 jobs nationally in August. That's good news. A full recovery for hotels is anticipated to take longer than other commercial real estate classes. And this is per CBRE, which is where the data from this table came from. Hotels located in drive-to destinations are already recovering. We've seen that right here in San Mateo County, coast side. But those that largely cater to business and international travelers like Burlingame hotels will experience a slower recovery. CBRE expects hotel demand will not fully recover until 2024. So,
Carol, we have
yes.
a question from the Vice Mayor.
Yes.
Sorry, Carol. My question was on the previous slide when you were talking about the ERAF. So there has been a decrease in the non-basic aid school districts, correct?
Yes.
So that has an effect on those property taxes that go toward the to fund the VLF. So do we know, first of all, how many schools are non-basic aid? And then how many more do you think are going to fall off?
The county does have that information and they share it with us. We have not had a meeting with them recently, but they do have that information and I can get that information from them to you. I'm not sure that they are expecting any to flip, so to speak, in the current fiscal year, but I'll definitely check with them and get back to you.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So we're talking about TOT, and this slide shows the chart that is shown in the staff report, and it was provided by John Hutar of the Visitors Bureau. The data is from CBRE, but it's specific to San Francisco area. It shows occupancy room rates fully recovered in 2023, but again, that is very general. It's across all hotel types in the area. Mr. Hutar's presentation to the Economic Development Subcommittee also showed that different areas of the country are showing a very uneven recovery. For example, Phoenix and Tampa Bay areas were recovering much quicker than San Francisco and Seattle. Okay. And this also, thank you, Megan. This also is the same chart that is shown in the staff report, except that I've added a red line indicating the average monthly amount of TOT that will be needed to generate the $14 million that is the amount in the adopted budget for the current fiscal year. We only have 1 month of results to include on this chart, July, which is shown as month 7 of the 2020 line, and it was about $450,000, I believe. So we have quite a ways to go to get up to the average of 1.17 million per month. Just as with so many other elements of the travel industry, the recovery will depend largely on how confident consumers and travelers are in the resuming their pre-pandemic travel schedules, which in turn will hinge upon the speed at which a safe and effective vaccine can be produced and distributed. I apologize for this slide. This is not very readable. It was meant to be a placeholder for some additional slides and information that was presented by the CDTFA, the California Department of Tax and Fees Administration, on Friday, just on Friday. They had some really great charts. This one I sort of cut and pasted. I just didn't get the rest of the slides in time, but I did take good notes. I was surprised to find that statewide Q1 of 2020 was very similar to Q1 of 2019. Actually, a little higher tax receipts. Q2 statewide was down 15.2%. The expectation is statewide again that Q3 will be 2% up from the same quarter in 2019, which was surprising to me. That's not what we're expecting for Burlingame's third quarter, but it's certainly good news. This particular slide shows that in most sectors, taxable transactions were, not surprisingly, down in the first 6 months of 2020 when compared to the prior year. The sector that grew the most, over 50%, was online sales. Again, not surprising. The next largest growth, about 15%, was in grocery stores, followed by home improvement and big box transactions. The biggest loser was oil, gasoline, department store clothing, electronic stores, and restaurants. A spokesman for the CDTFA actually summarized by saying, in all, consumer spending has held up surprisingly well. So that was kind of surprising to me because our data is quite limited, or quite delayed, I should say. Transaction taxes like Measure I fared better than point of sale results because those taxes go to the place of delivery for online sales. Point of sale, if they're in state, go largely to distribution centers, online sales, and to county pools. Recently, though, some good news, we received the second quarter true up of Measure I revenues of approximately $200,000. We've determined that these revenues do belong to Q2. We will make an adjusting entry to our books. So it's not included here, but revenues are in general approximately $200,000 higher than we've reported here. So that's good news. It just came in very, very late, too late for this report. You can recall that at the time of the mid-year report, the staff was poised to recommend an increase in the sales and use tax budget for 1920. The adopted budget was 14.8 million, but we adjusted that downwards in response to the emergency health orders. We adjusted it to 14.2 million. So with the additional Measure I payment, we'll be very close to the budget as originally adopted June 2019. So that's pretty good news.
Excuse me, Director Augustine, I see that Councilmember Brownrigg has his hand up, so I want to give him an opportunity to pipe in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just a quick question, because I can't quite read the font. Is the second to last column, is that auto sales?
It is auto repair.
Auto repair. Are auto sales called out in this?
It's the very first one, the very first negative red. Looks down like 17%.
Okay. That's obviously a big income earner for us as well. Thank you, Madam.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Carol.
Thank you. Okay, and the next chart shows a different slice of general fund, moving to general fund expenditures. This is a different slice than is shown in the staff report. Those charts show that operating costs contributed 2.8 million to the 4.5 million budgetary savings. Salaries, wages, and benefits contribute 1.6 million. In addition to the usual savings for many position vacancies, Much of the city's casual workforce was furloughed in April and eventually terminated in May. And you can see here that the contributions to the $4.5 million budgetary savings is due first to unspent budget for parks and recreation programs. And this makes total sense because of their heavy reliance on part-time workforce for their programs. It also coincides with the greatly reduced revenues for the department. The charges for services by department table is shown on page 10 of the staff report, and it shows how those revenues for programs, particularly the summer camps, were reduced. General government includes the city council and all the administrative departments, and the budgetary savings there are about average. The fire department shows the smallest of budget variances as CCFD expenditures exceeded the funding from the participating jurisdictions. Burlingame has a small additional budget for internal disaster preparedness, and that is why there is a small bit of savings there. Community development.
Director Augustine, I'm sorry, we've got two questions from colleagues. I think Councilmember Coulson had her hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I just have a quick, Margaret might have to answer this quick question on the aquatic center. So we obviously, most unfortunate timing where the pool was down for 2 years and then we had COVID. It would have been nice had those coincided, but they didn't. So we were already, really propping up that organization. Obviously, the actuals are coming in much lower. The San Mateo Union High School District just passed a very large capital bond. This just sort of reminds me that I think Councilman Brownrigg and I were working on that project as well together. And I think it would be worth a revisit to them about the capital structure for that pool, just given how well they're financed for capital and the huge pressures that are going to come on us as a city. So, and maybe we can have a further discussion about that. And then also just, do we really think, are we going to need, is 480,000 what we're going to need to put in to support it?
Are you asking for the aquatic center? So that money's pass-through money, it's operating. So the money that we would owe the district is in CIP, so it wouldn't show here. But
okay.
Because the pool was down, there's no pass-through money coming from BAC going to the district for operations.
Okay, so do we pitch in, Mark? So I do understand that there's an operating and a capital. So it is two sort of separate comments. So on the operating center, on the operating budget, basically we're going to be backfilling to make sure that they stay open and we can give them a lifeline to get through this. Is that correct?
Right. So instead of the money coming to us as a revenue, we'll just be paid.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, great. And then maybe it would be worth our while to just sit down, Lisa, Michael, me, I'd be happy to do it, and just think about how we might have a conversation with the district, especially in terms of getting those bathrooms reoriented there to be both ADA and gender compliant. And I just think with them having just recently passed this, it might be this very large bond, it might be a good time to check in on that. That's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson. Councilmember Brownrigg, you had your hand up as well. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I will endorse Councilman Coulson's comments and appreciate them. I just wanted to mention two other quick things. One, with respect to, well, first of all, to take a step back, I want to thank the city manager and director of finance, Augustine, for all of this work. This is, as we all recognize, an incredibly difficult time. And I think to see basically still delivering high quality services, still with good morale from what I can tell in our workforce, notwithstanding the challenges, and to come in under budget is appreciated and hard. I did want to say to my colleagues with respect to Central County Fire, this is not, as large a drop as some of the other departments. However, Central County had a significant budget increase. It had planned for capital equipment that had been put on hold. So fire is doing what it can to contribute to make everybody, all of the 3-member agencies lives a little bit easier. So I just wanted to point that out. And then finally, I wanted to point out, not that I think it's the right thing, if you need to shed some costs, then the people who you have to release first are temporary and casual workers. It is a great shame that $1.2 million is not in our community, not helping people put food on their tables and not provide the services to our residents. So I'm not in any way questioning those decisions, but it is part of what makes this COVID such a vicious cycle. And so I just wanted to make those comments. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And thanks, Director Augustine. Unless I don't see any other questions from colleagues, so please continue.
Okay, the only thing I wanted to say left on this slide is community development shows a large budget variance of nearly $500,000. Some of those budgetary savings are for economic development programs for small businesses. So that funding will carry over into the new current year budget. Some of those programs more recently funded will carry over into the new budget, the current year budget. And then in the staff report, the next thing I talked about was the coronavirus relief fund, but let's go ahead with the general fund summary here. With revenues of about 70.6 million and expenditures of about 70 million, we have a net operating surplus for the fiscal year of about $615,000. After we transfer to the capital investment reserve as called for in the budget, a deficit of 5.8 million is the impact to the general fund balance. On the next slide, we can see the beginning balance of almost 49.2 million decreased to about 43.3 million in the past fiscal year. The current year adopted budget 2021 is shown for comparison. You'll notice that we adjusted this year's budget to reflect the impact anticipated from the pandemic. We greatly reduced the transfer to the 5-year capital project plan. That's not sustainable in the long term. We made no transfer to the capital investment reserve, and we took advantage of a one-time decrease of $2 million in the debt service fund, as we'll be utilizing $2 million that was set aside from the general fund and Measure I in fiscal year 18-19 to fund the 2019 lease revenue bonds issued in December for the new community center. And on the next slide, all these are charts are in the report. As you can see, with the reduced revenues experienced, we will be able to reduce the economic stability reserve somewhat, as the city's general fund reserve policy dictates that 24% of the year's budgeted revenues be set aside in this reserve. Now we can talk a little bit about the coronavirus relief funds. The state's program to distribute coronavirus relief funds from the Federal CARES Act to local governments resulted in the city of Burlingame being allocated $371,871. As you can see from the chart that was added today, this is not in your report. The city's response has far exceeded the $370,000. Almost $2,000 will be receiving in coronavirus relief funds. The total pie adds up to nearly 1.15 million, about 39% for assistance to households and individuals in blue. The yellow is assistance to businesses, whether it be through direct grants from the San Mateo County Strong SMCU Community Fund, the Restarting Business Assistance Program, the Business Improvement District fees, and the remainder on internal city operations are in green. For unemployment costs, IT enhancements, et cetera. So for purposes of qualifying for reimbursement, public safety personnel costs are and this was surprising to me, but in large part, they are presumed to be engaged in relief activities, but they're not included on this chart. They were not included in our first and only filing with the state on qualified expenditures because we did expend the entire $371,000. That'll also be our last filing with the state. So just an illustration of how we spent direct, how the city responded to the coronavirus.
Thank you, Director Augustine. I see Councilmember Coulson and Vice Mayor O'Brien both have their hands up. So let's go with Councilmember Coulson. I think first.
So Carol, thank you. I just have a quick question. I cannot add it up in my head that fast. So what is the total of the coronavirus relief funds that we've both implemented from the city, everything, even the DBID fees, all of that? Is it, what is the total dollar?
It's over $1 million. What I have in this pie chart is 1.15 million.
Okay.
What we did not count is our public safety personnel, which were deemed to be qualifying expenses for the most part. But we just didn't include those because we had already exceeded the amount that we were going to be reimbursed. Also not included is all the public work expenditures that are going into the parklets, et cetera, all the work done with the business community in that area.
So following up on that, the barriers, which by the way, I know people were mixed sometimes about the barriers, but there was luckily no one hurt. Someone did take out half a parklet in San Francisco with their car over the weekend. So I'm really happy that we have implemented the safety elements. And I'm just curious, do we know what that number is going to be on top of it? Do we have an idea of what those are all costing?
I have not requested that from the Public Works Department. I figured they had their hands full. So no, I don't, but I will ask the question and we can get that to you.
Okay, I believe I saw it. Now that I'm recalling, I think when we looked at that issue, it was something on the order of like another 80,000, what we'd already done. So my guess is it's going to be well over $100,000 into those as well. So that puts us close to $1.25 million, $1,250,000, which for a small town of 30,000 people is quite a bit on a per capita basis. And I feel very good about this and I'm glad we're doing it. This is all really important.
Thanks, Councilmember Coulson. Go ahead, Vice Mayor O'Brien.
Yes, so mine is more a, comment and question. I appreciate, Director Augustine, this pie chart, because I was wondering how much we spent on COVID funding. Once we get the costs of the public works and public safety, is it possible you can incorporate that into this pie chart and then we send it out in our e-news so the public knows how much funding has been spent in the city of Burlingame?
You bet.
Great.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up from colleagues. Please continue, Director Augustine.
Okay, for others that find it difficult to do the math in their heads, that's about of the blue, for individuals and residents, that's about $445,000 spent. In the yellow area, about $505,000. And for the facility improvements and the IT improvements and unemployment, the cost associated with the casual workers being furloughed, that's another close to $200,000. Okay, and next slide. I added a few charts to the end. Just this is not a new chart. I've included it here just as a reminder that we do continue to amortize and expense our retiree medical benefits through a 115 trust with CERBT, Retirement Benefit Trust invested by CalPERS. The trust was over 22.8 million as of June 30th, 2020, with a one-year return of 3.49%. And the next slide shows the city's contributions to the Pension Benefits Trust with PARS, also a 115 plan. These are contributions from all funds shown here. That's why they don't match up with the general fund restricted fund balance. The actual balance in PARS at June 30th, 2020 was $12,563,000. The investment return on that account for the fiscal year was 4.63. And also in the staff report, this reminds us that we have 24.6 million remaining in the capital investment reserve after funding the new community center project.
Thank you, Director Augustine. Councilmember Brownrigg, go ahead with a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick reminder, Director Augustine, we plan a session to dive deeper on budget funding, right, later this year?
We do have a session that talks about retiree medical benefit funding and the additional pension funding. So we can take a deeper dive into those and how those funds are being invested and whether we want to make any changes to that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Just wanted everyone to know that.
Okay, so for next steps, which is the last slide here, we are requesting adoption of a resolution to increase fiscal year 2021 general fund revenues for receipt of the coronavirus relief funds. Again, we are receiving those from July to December, 1/6 of the total amount of our allocation. So those are for sure. Those are certain. We are not recommending any other at this time adjustments to the 2021 budget. We, again, just simply don't know a whole lot more than we knew at the in July when we adopted the budget. You know, some things I feel more pessimistically about, and some things I feel more optimistically about, but not to the extent that there is any certainty in any of those predictions. So the next few months should help us, actually the next 5 months should help us determine, we should be able to come back with some recommendations at mid-year. We are currently ready to undergo the independent audit of our 1920 fiscal year and prepare our CAFR. And then, as Mr. Brownrigg suggested, the study session on 115 trust funds for post-employment benefits will be held in October. And we'll present the CAFR to the City Council in December 2020. And I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Director Augustine. And again, huge thanks to you and your staff for doing this extra step this year, which is just really important, even though we don't have any crystal ball with certainty. I think it gives us all peace of mind to kind of have a sense of where things are falling right now. Councilmember Coulson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, Madam Mayor. So I have just two unrelated questions. The first one has to do with potential layoffs. I'm looking through the report and it appears as though, you know, it's hard to say with 100% certainty, but have we had to lay off employees other than our casual employees? And the reason I ask is because I believe almost every single city up and down the peninsula has made some adjustments and some layoffs. And I'm really going to be happy if we do not have to, if we can continue to maintain our workforce. And I think we owe a lot of that ability to maintain our workforce to our city manager, Lisa Goldman, who has really tapped down on headcount and worked hard to make sure that we're an efficient, lean and mean organization. And every single department, when you look at productivity levels of the city of Burlingame compared to other cities, I think our staff has been very, very productive. And even during this COVID, they've generally been working really, really hard. So I hope we can maintain our staff.
Thank you. I'll just ping in here. So I appreciate that, Councilmember Colson. When we've had a number of employee town halls since all of this crazy started back in March, and one of the big questions for everyone is, are there layoffs on the horizon? And people are seeing what's going on in neighboring jurisdictions, almost all of which have had to do layoffs. And my promise to them is to avoid them at all costs, you know, unless something really catastrophic happens, because we are a small, lean organization. We don't really have extra people. And so and we're a service organization. So when we lay off staff, that means we're not doing programs and services that the community wants and expects to have. And that's why we did unfortunately have to lay off our casual employees, because they were providing programming that we just couldn't offer. A lot of our rec programs we simply couldn't offer when everybody was locked down in their homes. So, and similarly, our library has been closed. And so they're doing, you know, we're doing curbside, and we've brought back, you know, maybe 1 or 2 people to help with that. But, you know, it's just not, it's not the program that it once was. And it will be someday, but it's not right now. And so our goal is to keep our full-time permanent staff here and working and productive. And we are, you know, we've done very good work on the council side and on the staff side to keep our expenditures down and to only hire people for things that we absolutely have to have them for. And so that is, you know, my promise to my organization and my promise to the council that we will, you know, do our best to keep our folks employed and working and not have to deal with that. I've been through layoffs in 2 prior jurisdictions, and it's really awful for the people who leave, and it's really awful for the people to stay. The morale in an organization after layoffs is really difficult. And, you know, we are a very, despite everything, as someone mentioned, I think it was Councilmember Brownrigg, you know, people are doing really well. They're pulling together and working together and, you know, happy to be doing what they're doing. And we want to keep it that way. So thank you.
I really want to thank you and Director Morrison for having such excellent lines of communication to our union members, to our union representatives, to all of our workforce, and making sure that they understand what we're doing. And I want to send a very clear message, at least as one council member, that I'm going to do my hardest to make sure we are able to maintain all of our employees and keep them on through this COVID, because I do not want to lose a single one. They're every single one of them very, very valued. The other quick question I have is for Carol, Director Augustine. It's around inflationary expectations, and you may not have an answer for it today, but I think one of my personal concerns, and when we talk about the investment portfolio down the road, I'd like to have a little bit more of an understanding of the potential for an inflationary outlook or not, only because I'm a little worried about the federal deficit is larger and larger, now becomes the size of our GDP. One thing that sometimes happens is inflation rises, and that's how you pay your very large deficits back with some lower valued dollars. And so I think that's really important when we're planning and thinking about, future planning with regard to both our investment portfolio, how we pay for people down the road, what kind of raises we give people during our negotiations. And I think having some sort of expectation around that, because I think trying to keep our purchasing power for people is going to be really important as well.
One would think when you have so much deficit spending that higher inflation would immediately follow. However, the feds are keeping interest rates low for the future. They are now anticipating that inflation will also remain low. They are no longer targeting 2% specifically. They are targeting 2% as an average. And so when inflation gets to 2%, they may or may not act in accordance with that. But we can anticipate lower interest rates for the future. So in the immediate future, inflation will also stay low.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions, Councilmember Coulson. Colleagues, any other questions or before we open it up to public comment? All right, seeing no questions right now, we'll see if any members of the public wish to speak on our budget update and this resolution we're considering to amend the budget to reflect the receipt of these coronavirus relief funds.
I don't have any emails, and it doesn't look like anyone has chatted, raised their hand either by phone or over the computer.
Okay, we'll give the public another moment here. If you're joining us by phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand on this item, or you can go to the participant window and raise your hand. I'm seeing none. So we'll go ahead and we'll close public comment and see if colleagues have any final closing comments. I think, again, we appreciate the update. I think, there's some good news and some bad news. The hotel TOT, which we are so dependent on, is very unknown. Property taxes, thank goodness, are strong, and sales tax is probably a little less bad than we thought, and that's quite consistent with information we're seeing at the county level at the Transportation Authority, where we sort of administer the sales tax funds for Measure A and W for transportation. It's sort of the same story, surprisingly a little stronger than we anticipated in the spring. And, there's certain sectors that are doing okay in sales tax. So we just have to hold our breath and see what comes to pass. But I see Councilmember Ortiz has his hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say once again, I echo what Councilmember Coulson said. Big thanks to City Manager Goldman and the staff for everything they've done to control our costs, or actually reduce our costs. And I think that it's great to look at this and see that the news is actually a little less bad than we expected. And it's very good news. And looking ahead, I think that, we just have to come out of this. As far as inflation, I think probably towards the end of next year, we need to have that conversation when employment starts to recover. In the meantime, I think we need to watch, I agree, interest rates next year will be a real topic of conversation. So need to watch out for that. Other than that, thank you, Carol. That's a great presentation. And thank you. I'll sleep better tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ortiz. Any other colleagues with closing comments, or would we like to consider a motion to adopt that resolution for the receipt of the coronavirus relief funds?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Councilmember Brownrigg, and a second from Vice Mayor O'Brien. Any closing comments? Seeing none, we'll take our roll call vote.
Councilmember Coulson,
Yes, with a big thank you.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes, with a huge thank you.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
Yes.
Mayor Beach.
I will echo a yes and a huge, huge thank you. We appreciate all the staff's work on that and the great stewardship that our staff and colleagues give to the city. So thank you. Moving on to item 10C, we have an ordinance to consider to adopt a minimum wage in the Burlingame Municipal Code. We had about a 3-hour robust and very thoughtful discussion and debate at our last city council meeting. The city manager reminded me we have a procedure when we have some split votes that there's been a request to put an item on staff reports and communications. So we have an opportunity to ask any additional questions, have a public comment, and then we can consider adopting the ordinance. So at this point, I'm going to ask if colleagues have any particular questions on the updated staff report or any other items before we open up to public comment. Seeing no hands raised, we will go ahead and open then public comment at this time. And Madam City Clerk, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
We do. We'll start with Laura Hines, who is here.
Thank you. And do you have a recommendation before Ms. Hines speaks based on how many people wish to speak? Do you recommend 2 or 3 minutes of comment per person?
Well, as everyone's hands are going up, I'm going to recommend 2 minutes.
Okay, so thank you for that. I'll help time as well. And we appreciate everybody's understanding that we'll try to be equitable and give everybody 2 minutes. So when I bump in and begin to cut you off at 2 minutes, it means no disrespect. We're just trying to be fair. So Ms. Hines, thank you for kicking us off.
Thank you. JFK said, "A rising tide lifts all boats." A rising tide lifts all boats. And Burlingame is rising out of the pandemic that we're in. We're starting to open up. I'm happy. And this is our opportunity to help those who work in Burlingame to survive these exceedingly difficult times, to be the tide that lifts their lives rather than an anchor that holds them to the bottom. $15 isn't a living wage. As some of you eloquently pointed out last meeting, it's the rock bottom minimum that we allow an employer to pay a worker. There was a lot of discussion about saving small service businesses with tip-based employees, but all minimum workers don't earn tips, and let's not punish them because others do. Tipped workers are not overhead, they're income generators that bring return customers. Councilmember Colson, you were a small business owner yourself, and in February, you told us you paid adult workers at least $35 an hour. Miss Sarah with the Department of Health said that 95% of minimum wage workers are adults and 45% are raising children. Vice Mayor O'Brien, allow me to point out that while 29 out of 59 business owners did say they opposed the increase, they may not all live in Burlingame. The next poll question was, what is the wage you pay your lowest paid employee? Only 14 responded with less than $15 an hour. The residents
Hines,
and
thank you
voters,
for finishing your sentence, and thanks for wrapping up in just a moment.
please approve. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. We appreciate your comments.
I was muted myself. The next comment we have is from Julie Lind.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council and staff. As was mentioned at your last meeting on the issue, none have been more impacted by COVID-19 than our low-wage workers. If you look at the demographics of workers making minimum wage, they're predominantly workers of color. The same workers contracting COVID at over twice the rate of the Caucasian population and being hospitalized over 4 times as often. At the last meeting, dissenting voices talked a lot about what raising the wage would do to businesses and business owners. What I didn't hear was mention of what it would mean for workers. These aren't folks hoping for some extra cash to get their hair done or upgrade their iPhones. These are people having to choose between feeding their kids and purchasing critical medication. This money won't go into savings accounts. It'll be funneled right back into the local economy. Many of you have volunteered at food distributions throughout the county. Those people you helped will be portioning out those small bags of food to make them go as far as possible for as long as possible. Many of them are the workers we're talking about tonight. See their faces in your minds as you ponder your votes this evening. Though some of your small businesses will likely tell you this wage increase will cause them to close their doors forever, that hasn't been the case in other jurisdictions. While COVID's made things exceedingly harder, the reality is that if making this marginal increased investment in workers is what puts a business over the edge, they had far bigger problems than adoption of this ordinance. California's minimum wage is going to $14 statewide on January 1st, and despite the economic impacts of the pandemic, the state did not choose to defer that increase. If the state of California feels that it's sustainable for businesses and an important investment in the economy, one of our most affluent cities located in the highest cost of living county in California should be able to do $1 more than that. Please move forward with this ordinance. Please invest in these workers as your community has told you via your survey that they are invested in. And please help give people a little bit of hope for the future. Thank you.
Lind.
Okay, I'm going to read a couple of emails. This first email comes from Melinda, and she states, I'm writing to you as an advocate for working people to ask that you support and pass the ordinance to raise the minimum wage this evening. I know you are aware of the effects of COVID, which has hit low-wage workers disproportionately when they were already struggling to make ends meet in Burlingame. I know you have heard from parents who must work multiple jobs to keep their children housed and fed. Please support children and families in our county by passing this ordinance tonight. Thank you for your leadership in these times. Our next email comes from Madeline. She states, I'd like to first thank Council Members Brownrigg and Ortiz and Mayor Beach on your yes vote to modestly increase the minimum wage in Burlingame. To Ann Keegren O'Brien and Donna Colson, I would like to just give a loud no thank you for your votes against the wage increase. I don't know what 12-dimensional chess game you think you're playing, but no reasonable human buys the performative allyship argument that it's okay to block a minimum wage increase in the name of women minority-owned businesses. I would think you all, being as educated as you are, would be able to recall all the moments in history where workers organized for better pay and humane laws and were met with opposition by corporate and business interests on the grounds that any progress would tank the economy and burn businesses to the ground. Like in 1887, when it was about $1 a day wage for Black workers. In 1912, when it was about worker deaths and sweatshops. In 1915, when workers formed unions. In 1924, when it was banning child labor. In 1938, when it was the 40-hour work week. In 1964, when it was equal pay for men and women. In 1970, when it was health and safety laws and unemployment. And apparently today in 2020, when it's a minimum wage increase that still isn't livable. You bring shame to the community, to this state, and to this country. And then our next comment is going to come from Nicole Fernandez.
Good evening, council members, Mayor Beach. Thank you again for taking this matter up regarding a $15 modest addition to your minimum wage. I'm Nicole Fernandez. I'm the chairperson of the Democratic Party here in San Mateo County, and I know many of you. Thank you for your service. I just want to reiterate what I said last time, which is that it is really important that the people who serve and work in your beautiful downtown have the ability to support their families. Many of them can't afford to live in Burlingame. They travel in from the East Bay or points north or points south, but it's really important that they have a wage that can sustain them, their commutes, and their families, especially during COVID-19. We know that you are wonderful public servants and serve your cities well, and we hope that you will be as empathetic to those works who need these wages as you are on other matters.
Thank you. Our next comment comes from Raina.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council members, staff. I'm Raina Lehman speaking in strong support of the adoption of the minimum wage ordinance tonight. I'm the Community Services Director with the Labor Council. Most of the workers in Burlingame earning under $15 an hour are preparing and serving your food. They're also cleaning your workplaces and hotels, taking care of your children and parents, and providing essential and personal services to the Burlingame community. These workers struggle every day. These workers are working 2 to 3 jobs to pay rent and feed their kids, and that's not okay. Businesses, not even mom and pop businesses, should stay open on the backs of low-wage workers. You have this moment to throw a lifeline to workers who have no alternatives. You can have an impact on the historic and pervasive inequality in our county and in your city. You can make a low-wage job a better job. The reality is most businesses in Burlingame pay more than $15 an hour, even during the pandemic. The reality is at your last city council meeting, there was overwhelming public support, and not just from us labor folks, for this minimum wage ordinance. We've heard all the statistics and surveys and economics. These are heartbreaking times for sure, characterized by unemployment, inequality, hunger, homelessness, and worse. But I end with an uplifting quote from Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. Please take this step. Thank you.
And next we have a phone number that called in. It ends with 1235. You want to unmute yourself?
You can unmute by dialing *6.
There we go.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Matt Sutton. I'm with the California Restaurant Association. No doubt what's before you comes with good intentions, and I just wanted to offer a few perspectives from the restaurant community, especially in the times we're in now. As you've heard, with or without your actions tonight, the minimum wage is still scheduled to continue on its historical trajectory to have another increase January 1st. In your previous presentation, you heard quite a bit about general fund issues, and one report was cited that I think said something to the effect of restaurants were the biggest losers economically. That's absolutely true what we're finding. At the outset of the COVID-19 public health threat, as you know, restaurants were shuttered to protect public health. Some restaurants subsequently opened on a limited basis to respond to the community demand for takeout meals. And as public health conditions improved, restaurants brought back their workers and did their best to operate in accordance with the mandated local public health guidelines, until asked to sacrifice for the greater public good, and since then have borne a disproportionate share of the economic damage inflicted by COVID-19. When the COVID-19 crisis passes, there's no doubt there will be scorched earth on the restaurant and employment landscape. We're asking you tonight to simply just press pause, to put a hold on the minimum wage discussion for now. As was cited in the report previously about general fund projections, terms of uncertainty, we don't know. All of the things you heard were so right about just the questionable environment we're in, and certainly the ability to make dubious revenue projections at best. And restaurants are absolutely connected to the health of your general fund. And so right now where we are with the governor's reopening tier system is restaurants in San Mateo County are literally fighting for their economic survival. And under that opening tier system, restaurants will be lucky to get indoors at a 25% occupancy. And if they're even luckier at 50% occupancy, but that's it. That's it for the foreseeable future. That's it for the calendar year. So in a sense, what that does
Mr.
is it
Sutton,
not
thanks
only...
for wrapping up with just a closing sentence, please. It's been 2 minutes. Thanks.
Sure, I just want thank you, and I appreciate that. The reopening tiers right now limit your occupancy, which limits the number of people you're able to employ. And so those things put us in a bit of a lock for the foreseeable future. And
Thank
that
you.
with the other issues related to COVID-19, we would just ask you if you
Mr.
could do
Sutton.
no harm.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to read a couple more emails. This one was from Matthew Sutton, so I'll skip that one since he just spoke. Our next one is from Ray Laros. He says, I recommend that you sustain the adoption of a minimum wage ordinance during tonight's meeting. As a Burlingame resident and a former minimum wage earner, I cannot stress enough how scientific data and my own personal anecdote support the overall benefits of an increase to the minimum wage. I will not elaborate on this here. However, as I mentioned in my last public comment during the last council meeting, we simply cannot move forward as a community if we believe the businesses can only thrive at the expense of paying inferior wages to their employees. Most importantly, failure to raise the minimum wage will hinder our plans for economic recovery and redevelopment, because we will find ourselves at a competitive disadvantage in comparison to other cities who will attract and retain more of the available labor force. I respect healthy debate, but we really need to step up and do the right thing for our city and our community. And next we have Aaron Chaser.
Good evening. Mayor Beach, Madam Vice Mayor, and council members. My name is Erin Kaiser, and I'm here on behalf of the San Mateo Central Labor Council, the San Mateo Building and Construction Trades Council, their affiliate unions, and their tens of thousands of local union members to urge you to implement the minimum wage ordinance before you this evening. While Burlingame is a largely prosperous community with affluent community members, many of your community members live in poverty. As the cost of living continues to increase, we have seen many of the cities in San Mateo County increase their minimum wage to help these workers, who are the most vulnerable among us. I'm glad that Burlingame has begun to move forward on this, and thank you to Mayor Beach, Councilmember Brownrigg, and Councilmember Ortiz for leading on this in the last meeting. Because so many of your neighbors have already passed similar ordinances, Burlingame has the benefit of seeing how well these ordinances have worked out elsewhere. There is no evidence that businesses have closed or that they have converted full-time staff members to part-time as a result of the ordinance. Healthy businesses have adapted, and they will adapt in Burlingame as well. Obviously, something front of mind for all of us right now is the coronavirus pandemic. I urge you to center the minimum wage workers as you make this decision. These minimum wage workers are our essential workers, many of them putting their health and safety at risk to serve us during this pandemic. These workers are the hardest hit by the pandemic. Low wage workers and workers of color bear some of the most severe financial and health burdens associated with the virus. These folks are struggling to keep up. A $15 an hour minimum wage job, even full-time, is not enough to cover the costs of housing and childcare and transportation and food and medical services, which, as we know, are more essential now during the pandemic than ever before. And those costs are higher for working families in Burlingame. I'll repeat what I said last time, which is that $15 an hour is not enough, but we do have to start here. And so I want to thank you in advance for starting.
Our next comment comes from Mike Dunham.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Mike Dunham, I'm Burlingame resident, member of Housing for All Burlingame and Peninsula for Everyone. Speaking tonight in strong support yet again of the minimum wage ordinance. Thank you, Council members Brownrigg and Ortiz, for voting to advance it, and thank you, Mayor Beach, for making this a cause for a very long time. I know it's been a long road, so thank you for the effort here. I want to reiterate a point that Mayor Beach brought up at the last meeting that I think is underappreciated in Burlingame. She pointed out that in Burlingame schools, which means for the most part students who live within the boundaries of our city, 11.5% of students qualify for free or reduced lunch. That means that those families, if they're a family of four, make at most $47,638 a year. That's assuming two parents working full time, that's a little less than $12 an hour, basically at minimum wage. That is more than 1 out of 10 students in our schools. In any given classroom, you'll have 2 or 3 students whose parents make minimum wage. That's, I think, shocking. And if you look at, the prices of homes around here and who can, they're sitting in the same classroom as parents who can afford to purchase a $2 million, $3 million, $4 million home. That is the depths of the income inequality in our city of the kids who sit in our schools. I think to raise the minimum wage by $1 or $2 a year ahead of the state of California is a very, very minimal change that would do a lot for those families. An extra $2,000 a year when you're making minimum wage has unbelievably positive impacts on kids. And I think a vote in favor to finalize this tonight is the right thing for justice. It's the right thing for kids. I urge you to approve this ordinance tonight. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any more emails and we don't have any Zoom chats. So unless someone else raises their hand, that is it.
Okay, thank you, Madam City Clerk. We'll give members of the public one more moment. If you're dialing in by phone and you haven't had a chance to speak, you can go ahead and dial *9 to raise your hand. If you're on Zoom, you can go to the participant window and then raise your hand there. I don't see any other members of the public raising hand, and I will do one last call in case you're having some technical difficulties. If you would prefer at this time, I'll even entertain people who want to unmute themselves if there's somebody who is having a technical difficulty with raising hands. Okay. Seeing none, we'll close public comment, and we thank all members of the public on all sides of this issue for being a part of the conversation both this week and 2 weeks ago. I see at this point, I see Councilmember Ortiz has his hand up. Go ahead.
Not a real straightforward issue. There are two very strong sides. I happen to fall on the yes side of the fence, but I think somebody said I was tied up like a pretzel when I was making my decision, which I found very interesting. But it just kind of bothers me when I hear these kind of attacks on my colleagues who fell on the no side. Again, we work hard to come up with these decisions. I think we deliberated, we talked a lot about it. There was a lot of thought that went into it. We don't just do this lightly, and that just didn't sit right with me when they mentioned that. So I'm sticking to my guns. Again, it was not an easy decision, but I think I'm going to continue. I would love to be able to carve out the employees with tips, because I do think that creates a really ugly difference. But we're going to go ahead with this, and I appreciate all you guys and everything you do. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ortiz. I see Vice Mayor O'Brien has her hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Beach, and thank you, Councilmember Ortiz. I do appreciate your kind words. In regards to this minimum wage, as I mentioned before, it's not necessarily the increase in minimum wage I'm against, it's the timing of it. If you all looked at our financials, it did say in there that our restaurants are losing 68.3% of taxable sales. So many of these restaurants are operating on a shoestring. And so my worry is, and we've already seen businesses close in Burlingame and throughout the rest of the peninsula, and especially San Francisco, that your low wage earners may lose their jobs completely. And that's what worries me the most. And so I would be more apt to support this if we delay the increase until June 2021. So at least we get through that flu season where we may have some issues with COVID. Getting through those tiers is going to take some time with the state requirements. We are heading into holiday season and winter. So those restaurants, many restaurants, and even personal care businesses such as nail salons may not be able to have many of their residents be able to dine or utilize the services indoors. So they're going to really potentially hurt income-wise the next few months, especially with winter. At least with next spring, they can get through the holidays, and then the warmer weather then starts in, May, June. And then if the coronavirus isn't, if we're not going a good direction, at least they'll still be able to have their business outdoors. So I feel like the delay that was even recommended by the California Restaurant Association would be helpful in at least trying to keep these businesses opened, keep those jobs in place, and then implement that minimum wage increase in June 2021. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Thank you, Vice Mayor O'Brien. Councilmember Coulson, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Also, thank you, Councilman Ortiz. I do appreciate that. I think anytime that you're talking about livelihoods, both sides, a robust conversation that takes a while and debate is healthy, and it's fine. So I do appreciate that you brought that up and the commentary around that. That is our responsibility here, which is to debate all angles. And we all may have slightly different perspectives, but I will say that I think all of us do care and want to make sure that our businesses and thus their employees are able to survive through the dead of winter. And especially when you cannot dine inside, when you cannot, you probably will not be able to use the parklets because of the inclement weather, and they're going to be virtually losing all of their traditionally high peak period, which is the November to December. So I am just worried about the impact of especially on the under 26 employees, which will go from, I think, 13 to 15 or 12 to 15 immediately. I think that's a pretty big hit for those workers. But if we do pass this, and I too would be willing to support an increase if we could at least defer it through the winter, March, April, May, sometime in there, so that we could let these businesses get on sound footing. If we do pass this tonight, I hope that the city will also help the restaurants and put placards out that explain why prices are probably going up, so that we can get people on board with that, and our community on board. Many of you may not look at Nextdoor, but there are, often complaints on Nextdoor about prices. And while many people are also, trying to figure out how to allocate resources, they may not be as willing to go out to dine. And then finally, the thing that has sort of bothered me the most about this ordinance from the very beginning is that it, in fact, actually does not include a mandatory minimum wage for the vast majority of our hotel workers, anyone that works for the city of Burlingame, nurses, school people that work on our school campuses, because it exempts anyone that's a part of a collective bargaining unit. They will be allowed to be paid less money than the minimum wage. And I don't think that's right. I don't. And I'm, speaking on behalf of my unionized waitress grandmother who worked 40 years in a restaurant. And I think that these people should be included. And I want to thank Ms. Lind from the Labor Council for her gracious support of that change. We couldn't get it included into this ordinance, but it will be coming back next month. And I sincerely appreciate the union representatives understanding that position and being willing to accommodate that and include their workers in this minimum wage. Because to say that, in fact, we're including 84% of the laborers in this county is simply not true. I checked, San Francisco, Palo Alto, San Mateo, every single one of these exempts the union workers or workers covered under a collective bargaining agreement. And then I checked into that and I talked to one of our temporary intern type workers in Burlingame. And in fact, they were paid $13.50 and they were not given any benefits. So, I would like to see that worker make $15 for the city of Burlingame. And right now, this bill doesn't mandate it. This ordinance does not mandate that. So thank you to my colleagues and thank you to everyone for being open to at least bringing that piece back. And when that piece is back next week, I will be voting yes to next meeting. I'll be voting yes to support it. So thank you very much. And I appreciate Mayor Beach's hard work on this. And it's not easy when you have a divided council. And, I hope that we can get to a place where maybe all of us can eventually agree. It might be March and it might be June, but I do think this council overall wants to make sure that our workers are cared for, all of them, every single one of them.
Thank you, Councilmember Coulson, and we appreciate you bringing that issue up about the exemption, which will be coming up at the next meeting, so we can update it. Just the timing of the ordinance, as we discussed last time, makes more sense to do it this way. Councilmember Brownrigg, do you have some final closing comments, or do you want to make a motion as well?
I'll take that invitation, Madam Mayor. But before I do so, I did want to make just a couple of quick comments. I'm not going to repeat our conversation from 2 weeks ago. I do appreciate Councilman Ortiz. He beat me to the punch. Just speaking personally for a second, this isn't easy. It's not easy taking shots from folks and working hard for not minimum wage up here on council. We all approach these issues really trying to figure out what's best, not what's best for me or my family, but what's best for the city. We don't always see it the same way. And I'm glad that there are 3 votes for this. I wish there were 4 or 5. And I think what I'm hearing is there might be if we pushed it off, but my dad used to say it's, especially when there were hard decisions to be made, that, it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. And that's kind of how I feel about the minimum wage. I actually think this is a tool that the country ought to be using much more aggressively. And I've thought that for decades. So I can't sit here and not vote to approve it. But I do appreciate the perspectives that especially Vice Mayor O'Brien and Councilman Colson brought with respect to the business community, because if we don't have businesses, we don't have jobs. Again, we see it differently, but that's not to say that, it's a guess about the future. And that's why we're making these choices. So I really appreciate the good faith that council brings to each of these decisions and the scrutiny. But with that said, I do think we had a good, thorough conversation. I do think it's the right thing to do. And so therefore, I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution. I do appreciate, just as a parenthetical remark, that we will be in the future removing the exclusion. I think it doesn't work. I think it's not very often used to not adopt the minimum wage. I think if unions routinely didn't want to do the minimum wage, we wouldn't have so many unions testifying for it. So, but I do appreciate that, double standards are never things that you like to see in public policy. So with that said, I'd like to make a motion to approve this ordinance. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilmember Brownrigg and a second from Councilmember Ortiz. And I want to echo everybody's thanks for a robust debate. This is democracy in action. It's not, sometimes it's messy, but it's how we get stuff done. And I think this is overall, weighing all the pros and cons, I think this is feels like, at least to me, the right thing to do, and appreciate others' perspectives as well. Won't rehash what we talked about extensively last meeting as well. So with that, we'll take our roll call vote on considering an accelerated minimum wage starting on January 1st.
Councilmember Colson,
No.
Councilmember Brownrigg,
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz,
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Brien,
No.
Mayor Beach.
Enthusiastic, yes. Thank you, colleagues. We have a 3-2 and appreciate the robust debate, and we appreciate all members of the public coming out tonight and last week as well. With that, we're moving on to item 11, Council Committee and Activities Reports and Announcements. We've got we have one written report. Is there anybody else who would like to highlight anything? Or if not, we can roll it up in future activity reports. Seeing no hands raised, we will consider item 12, future agenda items. We've got a lot on our plate this fall. Really appreciate staff's hard work in trying to queue everything in. So seeing no hands raised, we'll move on then to item 13. Do we have any other acknowledgements that we should consider? We appreciate all the different minutes. And then before we adjourn, does anybody, colleagues, have anybody who we may have lost here in Burlingame in the last 2 weeks that we should consider adjourning in memory of?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a name. I unfortunately was not able to get much information about her, but my neighbor down the street, Annette Ayu, passed away. We'd love if we could close in her memory.
Thank you, Councilmember Ortiz. We will be thinking of Annette as we close the meeting with a moment of silence in her memory, your neighbor. With that, thank you all for being a part of this meeting. Our next City Council meeting will take place on Monday, October 5th, 2020. Thank you all. Stay safe, stay healthy, have a good night, and remember to National Vote Day tomorrow, right? Right, Megan? So get geared up for the November election. Thank you all so much. Have a great evening.